Welcome to Moms in the Zone, where we talk about sports from a different perspective, from the mom's perspective. Today's guest is Lynn Redd. She's the mom of University of Michigan redshirt sophomore linebacker Cameron McGrone, number 44. Welcome to the show, Lynn.
Hi, hello, ladies.
Hi. Yes, hi. Thank you for being a guest on Moms in the Zone. So, I love Cameron McGrone, and I just want to hype him up a little bit. He is a Lawrence Central graduate from Indianapolis, Indiana. Whoop, whoop. So he's a
Go Bears.
town. So yes, I mean, during the season, I just love it. Like after we see Marquise play, my husband's always looking for Cam. Like, what was Cam's stats? He has a few kids he's always looking for, and Cam is one of them. So we just love seeing him play, and we just thank you for being on the show today. So
yeah, thank you for having me.
Yes. So the first thing I want to ask you is tell us a little bit about Lynn Redd, the mom of Cameron McGrone.
Well, I'm 41. I just turned 41 this year, and I'm married to my husband David, and we also have another son, Aaron, who's 11.
Okay.
I'm a forensic scientist in a crime lab, and been there for I guess total in all my jobs, because at one point I was a CSI for 22 years, since 1998. I worked in the field since 1998. And I'm sorry, can you guys hear those beeps? I need to mute that, sorry.
That's okay. I don't hear it.
Yeah.
I'm just so in love with this forensic. Can I job shadow you? Because I watch Forensic Files. I watch Snaps. I mean, I'm just all into that. I'm so serious. I just
no. Anything on IDTV, Andrea and I are your girls. Like, if you need help, we may even have some ideas.
I'm telling you, I think women, if more women got into forensics, crimes will be solved in days. There will be no cold cases, because we know how to find out.
And we're natural detectives. We're just natural detectives. We'll find that out. They'll be like, they don't know. Yeah, we know. We know.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm a homebody, other than going up to Ann Arbor for the games, and I help take care of my mom. She's 73, and she's a big part of my life. So I see her often, and she helps me with my 11-year-old. So.
Okay. Now here's the next question. Tell us about Cameron McGrone as your son. And then I always see on social media Cameron and his little brother's relationship. So tell us a little bit about Cam, but tell us about that special relationship that the two of them have, because when I see it on social media, he loves and adores his big brother, and Cameron, loves and adores him too. And I think that's important, because he obviously looks up to his big brother. So talk a little bit about Cameron and his relationship with his little brother.
Well, I was 21 when I had Cameron. I was a single mom, and David came into our lives in the very beginning of 2008, and they bonded through football. That was Cameron's first year playing, was in third grade in 2008. I had Aaron shortly after, and we didn't know at first, but Aaron, he would get real tense and anxious when we would take him, even as a small child, baby, a toddler. He would get anxious around when we would take him to Cameron's football games and things. And he got to the point where he would scream, and we didn't know, I just thought he was colicky. But I would take him to my mom's house, and she would babysit him. It turned out after a few years, he was diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum. So that's when we understood, he wasn't just a colicky baby, or he had issues with the noise, because they have sensitivity to they have those types of sensitivity. So he was missing out on games, and Cameron was kind of sad, because when we were at home, he was fine, of course, and they play and stuff, and even though there was a 9-year gap, he wouldn't think the way they act with each other.
Right.
Yeah. Their peas in the pod is crazy.
Right.
But so when Cameron got to high school, because I don't think Cameron was emotionally mature yet when he was junior high, so I would leave Aaron at home, and if I couldn't, there were times that I would have to bring him with me. And then I would have to sit in the car and like watch from the parking lot because Aaron would just get so anxious and he'd cry and scream, whatever. So when it got to the part where Cameron was in high school, Aaron couldn't go because Lawrence Central, when they score touchdowns, they let off a boom, like some type of firework or something.
Right,
so
right.
Aaron really wasn't having that. Also, Cameron wrestled, so when the siren went off or at the end of the match, Aaron would go off, and then he ran track. So of course, when they shoot the gun, he just couldn't go to any of Cameron's sporting events.
Oh.
And so what Cameron did, he suggested, he was like, well, see if Aaron wants to come to a volleyball game. There's not a lot of people there. It's just usually the parents.
Mm-hmm.
And then he started taking Aaron to all these different sporting events because I went ahead and bought Cameron a season pass, and I bought myself a season pass.
Mm-hmm.
But I would kind of like lay back and because Aaron somehow he's more comfortable with his brother because I guess his brother's not a disciplinarian to him. So he would go off and sit with Cameron and his friends, and Cameron would see like the time start winding down for each quarter of the game or each whatever the volleyball term is, and he was like, all right, Aaron, here comes the buzzer, and, and Aaron would put his hands over his ears, and over time, he started. He would say, he would look up at the clock. He's like, Bubby, he calls him Bubby. Bubby, it's about to go off. It's about to go off. And sooner or later, I started noticing Aaron wasn't putting his hands over his ears anymore. He was still saying it's about to go off. And then he wasn't even prepping himself to say it's about to go off. So over time, Aaron got used to being around loud noises. He got used to being around a lot of people because Cameron helped him, made him sure that he was okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's awesome.
Okay. Okay. My emotions.
That's so awesome.
Okay. Let me get myself together. Everybody tell you I'm very emotional, and that just got all of my heartstrings. They started pulling in every direction. Okay. All right. Okay.
Tell us about your son. As far as how did he get started playing football? How did that? I know you said that he, your husband kind of got him started, but from there, how did it, blossom?
Well, when I was when I was with him, it was me and Cameron. Like I leaned on my father a lot. He was a big influence in his life as well. And he, I'm sorry, he's passed.
Okay.
Sorry.
He would take Cameron to all of his sporting events for me, like baseball or soccer. Cameron played every sport you could think of. And I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah. It's okay.
My
I lost my mom, just last year. So
yeah, I know you lost your parent.
Yeah.
It's been 6 years and I still get it.
No, it's okay.
It's okay.
And there's no time.
Bad. I mean,
there's no time frame for things like that. Grief has no expiration date, know?
Yeah.
And so, you take your time. We're here with you. Take your time.
Thank you. But my father was an athlete when he was younger. And so he told me, like he had, of course, he was born in 1943. So he had this idea about a man and how a man should act. And so he's like, well, you don't want your son to be a punk, so you need to put him in sports. Oh my gosh. And then so like, but Cameron, he was so sensitive. And I was like, well, what should I do? Like, what would work with my schedule? So he was like, I was like, Cameron, do you want to do karate? He was like, no, mommy, I don't want to hit people. And I was like, do you want to do soccer? And he was like, okay. And then the first day of practice, a little girl kicked the ball and gave him a bloody nose. He was like, I am done. And then
that's it with soccer, right?
He was over it. And then baseball, he actually played a few seasons of baseball, Little League. And then I think it was just like, because my father had that whole, you got to be tough. And so as time went on, he played basketball as well. He was not into it. He was, at the time when Cameron played, he played 2 seasons. And for like 2 years, he had like this little bitty afro. He's like 5 or 6. And he would stand in the middle of the court and just playing his hair. And I'm like, well, I knew basketball wasn't his thing either.
Right.
So I was like, okay, baseball it is. And my father was a golfer. And so he would take Cameron to the golf course, sneak him on the golf course, 7 years old, sneaking, letting him drive the golf cart. So that was his thing too. So it's okay, my son's going to be a baseball player and a golfer. And then when David came along, like he came along where it was, I guess, like right around Super Bowl time, and he and I remember he was watching it with him. And then as time went on, like David and my father's relationship was building, and then David started talking to my dad, because my dad used to play football, and his brother, actually, I think Andrea, your grandfather might have played with my dad. Somebody, some one of your uncles or something stopped me when we were on a visit to Michigan and was like, "Are you related to Frank McGrone?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's my uncle." So anyway, my uncle was like, yeah, my uncle was like all state, like 3 years in a row or something. So my father and my uncle were big football players way back in the late 50s, early 60s. So David and him bonded over talking about football. Another thing is that David really liked that Cameron started being interested in it, because David had asthma and heart murmurs when he was a child. So he couldn't play. His parents were very overprotective of him, but he hung around all the football players all the time. He was always in the locker room with them. He worked out with them, but his parents just would not let him play. So when Cameron started showing interest, David was like super excited. Right. So we enrolled him at the Lawrence Junior Football League over off of Fort Harrison, off of 56th and Glen. And I like that league because they practiced there 3 days a week, and the games were always there. Because that's the one thing with me being a CSI at the time, I was working night shift, and I had moved back home with my parents when Cameron was very small. And so I was like, I need to have them help me, and I know they're not going to travel. If I get caught at a crime scene, my father's not going to Pop Warner him all the way down to Louisville. Right. So he played at that league, and it was crazy because Cameron's always been very quiet and pretty shy, like one of those kids doesn't speak unless he's spoken to. And he just turned into like an animal. He turned into an animal on the football field, you know, and my father nicknamed him Freight Train McGrone. And at the end of his first season, they won the third grade Super Bowl. And my father went and didn't tell anybody. He went and got a trophy made. He already knew.
He was a proud papa.
Oh my God, Papa loved that boy, and he went and got a trophy made. Cameron Freight Train McGrone, Super Bowl champ. And he had it on the day of the Super Bowl. I was like, what if they didn't win? He's like, well, I just would have had him etch something else, player of MVP. That started it. And now, like I said, that was when he was 8 years old. And my father passed away when right after his 8th grade season, 2014. Yeah. So he passed away right after his 8th grade season. So he didn't get to see him in high school or anything, but David and my father and Cameron and they were just super tight and always watched football together and talked about football, and it was crazy because Cameron didn't really watch football. He would play Madden, and Cameron didn't start watching football on TV until he started getting recruited, because he was like, I guess I better start seeing who these colleges are. He was a video game kid, so he didn't really watch sports like that, but he was interested in playing sports. He just didn't care to watch them. So but his interest in it just built over time, and that was like the big thing that he and David bonded over. So that was great.
So I have a question. Like for you as Cameron's mom, when you were watching him and you seen him to start to advance, like when did it set in your spirit, like, okay, my baby pretty good? Like when did that come about? Like, okay, my baby, yes.
It wasn't until he got his first offer. Like, you know, everybody was saying things like, oh my gosh, he has it, or, you know, like he's really talented and he's very high football IQ. I would hear all these words. I had no clue. You know, because I watch football and it's like, okay, let me go get this Colt shirt and cheer for the home team. But I didn't know anything about the X's and O's.
Right.
I'm still learning.
The X's and O's. That's right.
The X's and O's I did not know. So like, we got a call that he was offered by Syracuse. That was his first offer, and it came like a week. We put him in this camp called Midwest Best.
Yes,
Yeah, and he won the defensive MVP. That was
he sure did.
his sophomore year, and his first offer came like a week after that. So I was like, okay, so that was a good camp to put him in, I just put him in like local camps. I didn't want to travel for camps. I was like, okay, this is in Indianapolis. You can go to this one. And
Right.
so his sophomore season, he had a really good season, and his freshman year, he dressed every game for varsity because, like I said, they were hyping him up, telling him how good he was. He dressed every game for varsity. He never stepped foot on the field. He was so defeated.
Yeah.
He was so defeated. But yeah, he was like one of only 2 freshmen that got to dress with varsity. So I was like, okay, well, at least he got to do that, and he didn't want to hear it. But so he had a good freshman season on the freshman squad, and then he started varsity his sophomore season. But as far as like, it didn't really sink into me like when he got that offer from Syracuse, and I had no clue how recruiting went. I was like, okay, let's commit. And he was like, and my brother had to slow me down. He was like, slow down, gym shoes. It's like, it's not time yet. It's not time. He was like, the boy's only a sophomore.
Right.
But yeah, so I was like, I didn't know how good he was. I was like, wow, a college wants to give him a free education, like, so it really didn't even set into me then until he got, but it really set into me when he started getting offers from Power Fives. Power 5 schools. And I was like, hold on, wait, these are the schools that are on TV. Like, these are the ones where their games are on NBC and Fox. I was like, this is crazy, so that's when it kind of set in for me. And I was like, okay, now I guess Cameron's supposed to be like this local celebrity kid, and then he was always going head to head with the boys at Cathedral, and
Right.
Marquise, as far as like who's in top 5 in the state. And
That's
so
it.
yeah, so they had like a nice little rivalry going on with each other. But like I said, it was up until he started getting offers from Power 5 schools where I was like, hold on, Stanford called? And it was just amazing to see people showing interest in him. And then for him to also be an honor roll student, I think it afforded him more opportunities from other schools like Stanford and Michigan, and Northwestern and schools like that.
Yes, absolutely. And let me ask you this, because you said, during the process, you didn't know anything about recruiting.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we want to be intentional on Moms in the Zone is giving moms the insight, because just as you didn't know, the 3 of us didn't know, and this is kind of how this was all birthed. Moms in the Zone came about because on our journey, we just didn't know. No one told us things. We were just like, okay. And we were just bouncing stuff off of each other because we just didn't know. So discuss and tell us and tell our viewers about the things that you didn't know in the process that you wish someone would have given you a little bit more insight about. And what are the things that you learned along the process that helped you and Cameron navigate that recruiting journey?
Well, one thing I probably should have done more is to be more involved in the coaches contacting him and being the first point of contact, because some of them they weren't really that good at abiding by that, the quiet period and things like that. So I probably should have spoke more with his high school coaches and saying, hey, let me know if these coaches show up to your schools, because I wanted to know before they, like, don't pull them out of class. Like there was all kind of things going on where I was just like, hold on. I was like, is that really supposed to be going on? So it was things like that where I should have made sure that when they found Cameron's number, however they were able to get it, that they should have had my number as well. Because there were times when Cameron would be studying for a test and his text message would be going off, and I'm like, is that your girlfriend? He's like, no, Mom, it's the coaches. And so I should have probably ran interference a little bit more. Like I said, he was able to keep his grades up and things like that. But I felt like at some points in the process, he was annoyed. And I was like, it should be fun. It should be fun with the idea of people wanting to give you thousands of dollars in scholarship money to get a free education while you bang your body around. But he felt kind of stressed at the process at some points. But towards the end, he was fine. But he was stressed out through the process, especially when he hurt himself. He was like, he was heartbroken because all those people that were pretty much stalking him, a lot of them stopped calling. So that was, so if I was the person they were talking to, then he probably wouldn't have felt that abandonment. Like if they were talking to me, then after he hurt himself, they wouldn't have like kicked him to the curb. They wouldn't have known because they would only have been talking to me.
Right. And that happens, what was you saying, Andrea?
No, I said that was a good learning opportunity to learn it while he was younger, because people will blow you up, and just as quick as they are to blow you up, they're so quick to tear you down. So, but I'm just glad that he had you. So during that process, how did you kind of step in and help him, just knowing how he kind of felt, defeated, being injured, and everybody stopped calling? So
well, we took note. We took note.
That's
and
it.
We were like, and there were a few schools where the coaches never stopped calling. I mean, like, there's one coach, I'll even drop his name, William Inge. He was the IU coach. Yeah. And he's a family man, church guy. And he, I mean, I feel like if I would have allowed him to come to the surgery in the waiting room, I think he would have been there. Like,
Coach Inge is amazing.
Yeah, he is. He's such a nice guy. I think he's at like Fresno State now.
Yeah.
But he's a really nice guy, and there were several other schools that still kept in touch. But that's the one that pops up in my head. But I just had to keep telling him, because he was real. Cameron, like I said, he's real quiet. He bottles up his emotions. So I was like, Cameron, I was like, it's not like it was 20 years ago with ACL, So they had a team doctor, but I started calling around, and I was like, who repairs the NFL players here in town? When an NFL player tears his ACL, where do they go? So I found Dr. Klotwijk, who was the team surgeon. He was contracted with the Colts, and I got into an appointment with him, and Cameron's recovery was amazing. He was back competing within 6 months.
Wow.
At the Nike regional, and then he actually got to go to the finals. So he was back, and he was running at the same speed and everything. I mean, of course, he was like icing his knee afterwards, where he wouldn't have had to before.
Right.
But yeah, he the whole time he was recovering, like there were times when I would see him just looking sad, and I was like, what? He's like, it hurt so bad, and I was like, it's still swollen, still recovering from surgery. It's gotta, you gotta push yourself, but then you have to know when you need to stop.
Right.
So I took him, he rehabbed with his school's trainer every day after school. And actually they had a period where they actually, like, weightlifting was the name of the class. And instead of him going and lifting weights, he would do that for like 30 minutes. And then the other part of the thing he would do is the rehab for his knee. And then after work, 2 times a week, if it wasn't myself, it would be my sister, or my brother would take him up to Fisher's to a private rehab that Dr. Klotwijk sent him to at Athletica, and they rehabbed him. So he was rehabbing 5 to 6 days a week, sometimes twice a day. And like I said, I think all that and me chasing around the house to make sure he stays hydrated. Because they said some of the things they think about when kids like tear their ACLs, they might not be hydrated enough. There might not be enough liquids like moisturizing, or I don't know, lubricating.
And it helps the healing process. Yes.
So I was like pretty much like, I was like making them drink bottles of water every time I saw, drink this down and drink it all till you're done. So I was a mad woman, because I just saw how hurt he was, and I didn't want him to continue to have those emotions. I was like, ugh. Like, it's almost like borderline depression, So I just wanted to push him to at least say, if his football career was over, we did everything we could to get you back in order. And
that's
it
it. Yeah.
And that's what we do as moms when we see our kids hurting like that. That's where, for me, it's like, that's when mom mode comes in. It's even though it's things that you can't control, it's like you will go to the ends of the earth to try to make sure that you're doing everything possible to put your child in the best position possible.
Right.
You know, so like you said with the injury, you know, looking up who is the doctor that's treating the NFL players. I mean, that's just such a smart move. I don't know that every mom would think of that, you know, but I just think that's such a smart move. And doing the extensive rehab, you know, even twice a day. I mean, just the things that we do as moms, just to make sure that our kids can have and continue to succeed is just a testament to what we do as moms.
That's it. And you know, and as you were speaking, I was just thinking about one of the things that we have talked a lot about on the show is the mental health of student athletes. I think sometimes, you know, the world just forgets that these kids, I mean, because they're kids, that's what they are, that these kids, male, female student athletes, need someone on staff or whatever university they may be at to do a mental health check in with them. And you made a very good point, especially, you know, post-op, you know, if they have an injury and they go into surgery, who is doing that post-op mental health check with these student athletes? Because it is a lot. It does cause depression, because you go from maybe being the star, you know, girl or star guy at your position within your sport to being sidelined on the bench because you're injured and you're recovering. That takes a mental toll, you know, because the desire is to be on the field or to be in the game or to you know, even practice, and you can't even practice. So it's not just playing the game. You can't do really anything that you were accustomed to doing. And so talk to us about, you know, what do you think universities need to do more, like mental health evaluations, things of that nature, as where you saw Cam feeling a little depressed. What do you feel would have helped him?
At the high school level, they have like counselors, but they're really like more steered towards the academic side.
Right.
So it would be nice to see if they could have somebody that could talk to the boys, you know, because there was a boy on Cameron's football team. He graduated a year before Cameron, and he I think he probably just got his degree from Wabash. He went there for track and football, I believe. But he was homeless, and nobody knew. And next thing you know, there's a TV a segment on the news about how he's on honor roll, about how he had a part-time job at like some fast food restaurant, and how he and his mom and his baby sister were living in those types of hotels that you pay by the week, the extended stay hotel off of Pendleton Pike. So like, we just don't know what people are going through, you know. And then some of these boys, I mean, are teenage parents, you know, but they still love football, and they still want to play football. So I had to talk to Cameron. Like, I just kept checking in with him because I know it wasn't happening at school. I emailed his teachers, asked them, could Cameron have a little extra time? You know, he just had surgery. He's on Vicodin. Can he have extra time? It was he hurt himself the last game of the season against Carmel, so he didn't get to compete in sectionals. And I think they ended up, I can't remember who they lost to, but they ended up losing the sectionals to Warren probably. And he was just like, I took him to the games he wanted to go, and I just saw him just like, he's like, I should be out there with my boys. And so I said, okay, Cameron, we're in the stands now, but you know, go out there. And he did. He went and sat on the bench, was like, please, if they make a touchdown, don't jump up, don't celebrate.
Right.
Your leg is in, your knee is in shambles. Just
right.
standing on top of the bench, jumping up and down when his friend made a touchdown. So I was like, oh gosh, here we go, you know. So
right.
It's just a matter of like, I just kept trying to make sure he was a part of the team, and told the coaches like, hey, like, you know, he was there for practice and stuff, but I just said, make sure Cameron's around. Because at one point he was sitting in the booth when they were practicing. And I was like, no, he needs to be on the field. He needs to be on the field. He needs to be around his friends. He needs to be coaching them. Because he was the starter. He needs to be coaching the second and third string boys to make them feel comfortable, make them know that they're able to replace him and that they're able to help the team win. Because the boy that was behind Cameron, my gosh, Cameron was a junior when he hurt himself. And the boy behind him was a sophomore, and he was like a deer in headlights. And so I just told Cameron, I was like, I don't know if anybody's talking to him, but please go talk to him and reassure him that he's ready, you know, and if he's not ready, it's your responsibility as the starter to get him ready, you know. So it was about me trying to keep him focused on recovery and to keep him focused as a leader. You know, like if you can't, you know, what do they say? Those who can't teach, you know, like if they can't do what their teachers, so there's a lot of there's a lot of football coaches that never played the game, past whatever, you know. So I told him, I was like, your football career could be over at a snap of a finger. I was like, so if you love the game like you say you do, then you would want to be involved in it in every way. And then you would want, and if it's a passion of yours, it means that you should be happy while you're doing it, you know. And when you find yourself not happy, then maybe it's time to step away or take a break. But you can find joy in helping people that are also passionate about it. So he started being around the boys more in practice and in weightlifting. Like he couldn't lift weights, he couldn't do squats, but I saw like his strength coach would take videos and Cameron would be right there next to the equipment screaming, "Go, you got this, you got this." And then there was even pictures in the there's a rivalry game every year with Lawrence North and Lawrence Central, the Battle of Lawrence Township. And Cameron didn't play in the second half of the game. He got a little upset at a play call the first half, so the referee told him he couldn't play the second half. So, but he was there, like right in the middle, just cheering him on. So that's part of the thing that makes me so proud. Like when I see him like in a situation where he can't play, but he's still being a good teammate. So I always try to encourage him. Like I said, he's a sensitive kid, and I think a lot of that comes from, you know, having his little brother and needing to be sensitive to differences and sensitive to how people's feelings are. So he's very astute when it comes to recognizing people's feelings, and in turn, he's in his feelings sometimes. So I have to watch him and make sure he's doing okay, because I want him to always love what he's doing. So and I really feel like high school level, they probably should have something, you know. At the college level, they do. At Michigan, they have a mental health section that's devoted to athletes. Greg Harden, he's Black man, and I think he just retired, but he and Coach Harbaugh had a really great relationship, and they had like an EAP, like they would have it, you know, like a job, like employee assistance, you know, but it was for the athletes. They could call and they can schedule appointments. They go in there and talk and have actual like mandatory, not mandatory, but voluntary therapy sessions if they wanted. And some kids took part of it, but again, because it's football, everybody's tough. People don't want to talk about their feelings. But I'm glad that some of the pro athletes are coming out and talking about that now. So our younger kids can feel more comfortable discussing it as well.
Absolutely.
I know a lot of pro athletes are coming out, but if we could start that earlier in high school, like you were saying, and I think that's a good opportunity for, and we always mention relational coaching, where the coaches should be reaching out to that school social worker, because that was my first thought is, you know, there should be some type of resource in the school. But I also think sports psychologists would be a good resource for athletes, because whether we, you know, people agree or not, the game is completely different, and they're starting younger, and that's it. You know, just coming up. So I'm glad that you as a mom could recognize that, but not every mother is going to be equipped to, you know, understand, to be a mental support, you know, for their student athlete. Give it.
Oh no. And you're absolutely right, Andrea. And the thing that I think about too is when Lynn said that, they have counselors, but those counselors are your academic counselors. They're making sure that everything is good for you to graduate, and that you stay eligible if you're a student athlete with the NCAA guidelines of eligibility for a student athlete. They are not equipped to talk to you about your mental health and your mental well-being. And so I totally agree that there has to be, and hopefully this platform that we've created with Moms in the Zone, that some person in the mental health field will see our episodes. And because it's been mentioned, you're not the first guest. Several guests have mentioned their kids checking in on their mental stability and well-being and things. And so I hope that the conversation starts and someone in that health profession sees this and says, hey, we need to do more on the high school level for these student athletes, because their first injury is not in college.
Right.
They're being concussed and everything else in high school.
Exactly. They're getting concussed in high school. They're facing, career-ending injuries in high school. And who's there? We as mothers, we do all that we can. We love on them, but we're not professionals, most of us in that arena. And so I just think there needs to be so much more done, when it comes to mental health of student athletes. So, yeah.
And I wanted to say, because you have your guidance counselor, and that is your academic person, but then the school also should, and most of them do have a school
social worker.
In that capacity,
right.
I think that's where the coach and the dynamic needs to change, because as a school social worker, you'll have that ability, but I don't know if that's something that has been communicated to them. So like I think this is a platform. Hey, this is something that I think school social workers should start to take on, this, and identify and do those assessments for student athletes as well. I mean, the ideal situation would be having a sports psychologist, because it wouldn't just be beneficial to football, but any of those.
Any sport,
Any sport, yeah.
It's even interesting.
Just the guidance counselor, school social worker.
It's even interesting that you're discussing this, because this was the very family discussion that we had last night with Derek, because he's wanting to change his major to psychology and he wants to stay connected to sports. And so we talked to him about sports psychology, because the interesting thing is at FAM, they don't have any type of counselor or psychologist for them to talk to. And so I mentioned to Derek, I said, maybe it's worth you having a conversation with the coach, or maybe I need to have a conversation with the coach, and maybe they need to connect with the school of, I'm not sure where the psychology department is held, maybe the school of science or something like that, and connect with the psychology department and some way, form some kind of partnership with the athletics department, and figure out a way to help not only the athletes, but you're helping the students in the psychology department as well, so I know from a cost perspective, I don't think FAM is in that position to have a psychologist on staff, but it's kind of like looking outside of what can you do. It's pairing up with, the department head of the School of Psychology. So I'm definitely going to try to pursue that. But that's a conversation that I've had with Derek, because they just don't have that resource.
And I didn't want to get too far off. And Lynn, I will keep you, because I know you like me. But as you were talking about FAMU, and that just takes me to, and again, I don't want to take this too far away, but it just takes me to HBCUs and athletics. I mean, we want to try to change the trajectory and make sure that some of our student athletes are attending HBCUs, but they have to be equipped. You know what I mean? So, because you're asking a student athlete to go to a school that doesn't have all the resources. So I hope this platform is a call to action for HBCUs, saying, hey, if you want more of those elite athletes, you got to have the resources. So you can't, say, dang, why didn't he go to HBCU? But I mean, you have to have those resources, because they still want to be able to have the, correct training and all those types of equipment. So I didn't want to.
And alumni has to support too. That's a big thing.
Yeah, alumni has to support.
Alumni
I think that's one of
probably,
the issues.
it's probably a big thing.
Yeah, and the fact that we know, like, seeing what's going on right now with trying to start football season in the middle of the pandemic, is we know that football funds a lot of the other things.
Absolutely.
So, and I know that a lot of regular college students think our boys are elitist because they get the scholarship and they get the food and things like that. But But if their programs are carrying the school pretty much and allowing them to have a water polo team and a badminton team or whatever they have, lacrosse, if they're able to have all these other sports programs because of football, then they need to allocate some money to make sure the football players are healthy mentally, physically, and emotionally and able to play. So that way they can generate the money that supports the school.
That's it.
Yeah.
I totally agree, because just as you stated, football funds so many other programs, and so it's kind of like being that employee at your job, on your career, is that, there should be a vested interest in me if I'm bringing the company millions of dollars, there should be, if I go down, you lose some money, and so I think that, there has to be more thought process, because at the end of the day, I think society sees our kids, oh, they're getting all these freebies. And one of the things, if you want to rub me the wrong way, tell me that our kids are getting a free education is the way to do it, because none of this stuff is free. And as you stated earlier, the injuries that their body goes through, all the camps that we've sent them to, everything, none of this is free, and free diminishes. It diminishes the work that they have put into it. And you tell me where someone's giving you 40, 50, 60, $70,000 a year for free, let me know where they're giving that out, because it's not free. And so I think a lot of times we feel like, hey, society feels like these kids are getting this free education, we're doing this, we're feeding them, we're doing all these things, and they forget about some other ways in which they need to provide resources. And then so again, I think that we as moms, we have to put it on our shoulders just to make a little bit of noise and just, have a platform where we can discuss these issues, and hopefully someone will see what we're talking about and say, hey, we're the ones that when they're crying and they're hurt and they don't feel like going on, we're the one that, that are, trying to, give them the confidence back and talk them through it. And we're not trained to do that. We're moms, which, but they also need those other resources as well. They definitely need those other resources. Now, I have a question for you as far as, Cam, juggling everything. How has he juggled what's going on with the pandemic? How has he done with that? Being home, having to leave campus, not the uncertainty of the season. How's he, dealing with all that?
Well, at the start of the year, they had that break, and then they were having, I think they had a period where they were starting to get into their workouts, and it was almost time for spring camp, and then they canceled everything. And at the time, they were like, I think their training facility, they were like, you could go there voluntarily by yourself, but the staff wouldn't be there. And then next thing you know, they shut it down for everybody. And so Cameron was just up there in his dorm, and he was like, what should I do? Should I come home or should I wait it out? And I was like, well, we've never been through a pandemic before, so I don't know how this goes.
Right.
And then then Michigan, the president was like, if you're in a dorm, find a way to get out. He's like, we're going to switch. We're going to switch to online only, so you can go home and get Wi-Fi at home and work from home. So then they were like, well, what about the athletes? So the athletes were still up there. They were telling the regular students to go home. And then somebody in his dorms, the food hall, the mess hall, or whatever you call it, the cafeteria on the first floor, one of the workers tested positive. And he called us the same day. He was like, okay, I'm ready to come back to Indianapolis.
Right.
So he called us, that was like noon, and on a Monday or Tuesday in beginning of March. And David got off work. He's like, let's go get our boy. So
that's it.
We drove up there. We got up there at 10 o'clock at night. And I was like, what do we do? Would you get a hotel? David said, no, I'm ready to go home. So we drove up and back in one day. We got home like 2:30 in the morning. Cameron went straight to his bed, and he was here up until in June. He was like a couple weeks before his birthday. I think June 15th or something, what it was when we took him back up there. But that time he was home. He got to hang out with his brother, and it was good because I'm an essential employee, of course, working at a crime lab. So, and my husband, he works at a metal anodizing plant. They do chemical metal stuff, and so he was an essential employee because he had to. They were processing all the metal that was used for those makeshift hospitals and tents they were making when the pandemic first started, and so he had to go to work. So it was nice having Cameron home because, like I said, with my 11-year-old Aaron, he would go to my mother's house. She would babysit him when David and I had to work, or if there were like school breaks and holidays and stuff where we both have to work. And I'm like, I don't want to expose my 73-year-old mom to COVID. So it was great having Aaron home until we could figure out how we're supposed to navigate through this.
Right.
But yeah, he was nervous about going back up at first because he was like, Mom, he was like, we're all homebodies. We're all like our family. We don't care. We'll sit around and hang out, talk, watch TV all day. He was like, my teammates aren't like that. He was like, there's some guys that are always have to, like they'll be sitting there and they'll be like, I'm about to go to the gas station and get bubble gum. Like he said, they just can't sit still. So he was like, I don't know how this is going to work.
Marquise will find any way to get out of this house, girl. He not sit still. Like I was telling them, like one night it was 11 o'clock at night. I hear the garage go up. Then I'm like, who's in the house? It's almost midnight. I called Marquise on the phone. Mom, I just can't sit in the house any longer. I'm going to Thornton's. Thornton's gas station.
He gets that from you a bit, so you can't.
I'm a busybody.
Stand still. If you tell me I can go somewhere, travel, I am out. I itinerary. We ain't even gotta have anything going on. But yeah, I get it because COVID had me like, oh, I gotta go somewhere.
So crazy, yeah. So he was good, and from what I've been told, because we have like weekly or bi-weekly Zoom meetings with Coach Harbaugh and the medical staff and the weight training staff, and Michigan has the lowest numbers. So out of the Big Ten,
right?
So that's good, and I think it's because Michigan's a research hospital. There are actually people on campus right now trying to come up with doing research on the pandemic and trying to find ways to help cure it, or at least help people live with the symptoms while they have them.
Right.
So they're on the forefront. And also what I found out on our last meeting was the NBA has an NBA bubble thing going on down in Florida. The guy that invented those rings that they're wearing to track their heart rate, their temperature, and whatever it's supposed to track, and then it's supposed to help with contact tracing that they're doing to see who's been around who. That person is a Michigan grad. And supposedly he's going to be working with Coach Harbaugh and President Schlissel and trying to see about getting those things for our boys to try to see if it can work for them. I think it's still in the beginning stages, but it's nice that he's an alum and he's willing to try to help the football team and help keep the numbers down.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Because I really do think the professional leagues are going to be the people that are kind of creating the standards or how we can navigate this. But I do feel like this is another opportunity for the NCAA to step up because I haven't really heard anything. And so if that's something that Michigan is doing, they should be talking to them because that's something they could deploy to all the universities to have that type of equipment. So I think that's amazing that, Michigan does have that resource.
We actually have a couple parents that are on the NCAA's neck right now. Like they're Chris and Maya Hinton. Chris used to play for the Colts. He was an all-pro, and he's actually his name is on the Ring of Honor. So he was like big time back in the 80s for the Colts. And his son Chris Jr. goes to school with Cameron. He's a defensive tackle. Then he has another son, Miles. He just started his freshman year at Stanford. So Maya's a retired lawyer, and Chris, like I said, he's a retired football player. So together they created a group, and they're trying to be advocates for college parents, especially in this time with COVID. And so they talked to us on the Zoom call too, and they were saying that we're just trying to advocate to make sure our boys are healthy. He's like, we're not just advocating for Michigan. We're like advocating for all the Power 5 schools and even the smaller schools to have a standard. Like, how are you guys quarantining if somebody tests positive? How are you guys doing contact tracing? What kind of staff you guys have helping clean the locker rooms and clean the weightlifting equipment? You know, how can we have the smallest amount of spread as possible? How can we flatten the curve within our football program or keep the curve not from even appearing? You know, so I appreciate them. There's a lot of people that are money driven and entertainment driven that are trying to make disparaging comments about them, but they want to play football. I mean, they want our boys to play football. They just want them to play safely.
Yeah.
And
Lynn, you can make that connection. I would love for them to be on the show. And the reason for them to be on, excuse me, is to be a resource for the NCAA. I mean, we're parents. We're all in this together.
Right.
You know what I mean? So if they have information, you know, I don't think people should think of that as a negative, but as a resource, as we're trying to resolve this, so we all can benefit. We want to watch the kids play. The kids want to play, you know, so I think that's a good thing. You know, I don't think it should be looked at as negative, you know, but
there's so many things that we don't know about COVID-19. We don't know what the long-term effects are because it just started 6 to 8 months ago, you know, like as far as in America. And so we don't know what the long-lasting effects are. What I'm hearing, I actually had a coworker. He was the first person in the state, I think, or maybe the first person in the metro area. He was in to have COVID, and he came back to work, and he told me that he's still tired. And he got it in March, and he was in the hospital for maybe 45 days or more. He said he's in his 60s, so he was like, I'm still so tired. He's like, I'm just so tired. I feel winded. He said one of the things that his doctor, like he's been having to get follow-ups because he said blood clots are one of the long-term effects of having COVID. So we don't know how people's bodies are. Like they tell us that, oh, the kids, they just have mild symptoms. And I'm like, well, what if you're a 350-pound lineman? You know, your body's not like the average 18-year-old. You know, and you're banging your body around, you're using your body a lot more than the average person. So maybe your body is like that of a 35-year-old, you know? And so those are the things that the Hintons are advocating, like, hey, like, and both of their sons are linemen. So it's like, hey, like, you know, how can we protect our boys? Because what if there's some long-term effects that we don't know about and they don't pop up until a couple of years from now? Like these boys, everybody that plays college football wants to go to the NFL. I don't know, even the walk-on kids that I know, like they're like working hard trying to get their scholarships, they can get noticed and get some playing time. And I'm just like, they all have that dream, and how will it be affected by a virus that we don't really know about? And it must be serious because you shut down the world pretty much. Like So I just think everybody needs to pump their brakes a little bit and take a little more time to lean on science and show some more care and concern about our young adults.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially instead of the monetary aspect of it. Because there's a whole industry built on the backs of our student athletes, even though they don't want them to benefit from it. I don't know what that makes, but yeah, you're right. Yeah. So it's not monetary, but you know, actually these are human beings that could be impacted, you know, for
years to come. Yeah.
Right. And that leads me to this question, Lynn. As you were speaking about, you know, when COVID hit, Cam came home, he was able to be home with Aaron, and you guys picking him up, and then your mother. Talk about that village of people that you have, because it seems like you have an amazing support system. And I know that in the Black community, for us, you know, we lean on that village so strongly, you know, and we can just call people and they're there for our kids, and we know that our kids are supported. They're going to love them. They're going to pick them up, all of those things. So talk a little bit about your village and how important your village has been throughout and navigating this process with Cameron, how important that village has been for you all.
It's been tremendous for me. Like, I don't think Cameron knows he wouldn't have been not. And before we took him up to college, I text him late at night, because it was some late at night, and I was like, these are the people that you need to thank for everything that has happened to you over the past 10 years. And it was both of my parents, my sister and her husband, who came along a little later, my brother, and David, of course, and Cameron's godmother, Sharita. When I was a CSI for the city, I worked there from 2006 to 2013, so that was right in the thick of things with Cameron getting into sports and starting to be noticed at the junior high and the high school level. And there were lots of games, like they'd play and they had practice every day after school. And for a couple of years, I worked night shift as crime scene when I very first started. They always put the rookies on nights. So that was 9 at night to 6 in the morning. So I would get Cameron ready for bed. I would leave. And then for Indianapolis, the way it goes is, if like my shift was at 6, if somebody got shot at 5, that was my crime scene. And I'm not going to be gone. I'm not going to be done with that crime scene by 6. So there were days that I worked. I think my longest shift was a 28-hour shift.
Wow.
And I worked 28 hours. Yeah. So there were times that, and then I switched. We had our personnel was low. It was like a revolving door because the job was so tough and the pay wasn't that great. I would start filling in for other people's shifts for overtime. And so Saturday mornings, I missed a few of Cameron's games. There were times that people would come like, hold on, what's going on at the football field? Because I would drive out there on my lunch break to try to catch some of the games. Would be a giant crime scene van out in front of the football field, like, what's going on in the football field? But,
we do what we have to do. Hey.
Yeah, but with that being said, it's like, it was so nice to pull up in my crime scene van, and I'm just thinking, okay, mom and dad are going to take Cameron to practice. They're going to watch his game, and I'm pulling up, and at the time, like I said, David and I were just dating, and so we weren't living together yet, and he lived all the way on the west side. I pull up at 10 o'clock in the morning to try to catch Cameron's game, and David's there. And my parents are there, and Sharita, his godmother's there, and Marilyn and my brother are there. So I'm like, everybody's here. And it's like, it's not because I asked them to be, it's just they knew 10 o'clock on Saturday is game time. And this was like a 8-year-old kid, so I'm like, who wants to see a whole bunch of little bobbleheads running around banging on each other? They don't know what they're doing. Right. Kid catch the ball and run the wrong way, so it was just great to have my family there. And through the process, like, my sister always, I call her, Moneybags Marilyn, because she's an engineer. Right. And as a single mom, like, even when he was playing baseball and he was playing basketball, like, she popped up over my house with cleats, like, what size, so. And then, my mom and dad, my dad was crazy. He bought Cameron golf clubs. He bought him baseball bats. He just did everything, like, just spoiling them. And then my brother, he's a fireman, my brother Chris. And firemen, they only work like 2 times a week. but I don't want to discount what they do, because when they work hard.
Right, absolutely.
So he had a lot of time off. And Chris came into play like a really important part of our life with the village when it was recruiting time, when people were inviting Cameron to recruit day and wanted him to visit colleges and stuff. My brother, he got off of his fireman shift at like 7 in the morning one day, and he went and picked up Cameron, and they drove all the way to Iowa to go visit the Hawkeyes, and they spent the night in some beat up motel, and then they went again in the morning to try to get the wheel and deal from the coaches at Iowa, and then they came back home. So there's been plenty of times where my brother has just come through. And even like when our boys, Andrea, when they went to the Army Bowl, you saw my family came, and my sister was like, oh, well, that's around Christmas, because he found out he was going to be in the Army Bowl in the fall. And she's like, oh, that's around Christmas. She's like, well, Merry Christmas. I'm buying everybody plane tickets. Like,
Hey,
wow.
money
All
brings
right,
very
hey, let's go.
right.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
So
So
I'm
you gotta tell
blessed.
me
I'm
twice.
very blessed and very fortunate because I know everybody doesn't have that type of resources, doesn't have the type of village, but
Mhm.
what we do have is we can have a presence. You know, like I
That's
know
it.
that a lot of families, they don't have a firefighter brother that's off 3 or 4 days a week that can drive your kid around. They don't have a sister that is financially stable enough to make sure that your son can have cleats and the fancy gloves or socks or whatever that they want to wear to make their uniform look cool. Um, and then like with a lot of moms, they don't have elders because they're, you know, what I've noticed, like when I would go to Cameron's football games in high schools, I felt like the oldest person there. And I had him when I was 21, you know?
Right,
So
right,
there's teenage mom after teenage mom, and grandmas are still working now. You know,
right.
like grandmas aren't retiring anymore because they're 45, you know?
Right,
So
right.
I understand that people aren't as blessed as I've been, but it's just good to try to make sure your friends are like, hey, like, can you just show up just to have a presence, let my child see you if you can't say
Mhm.
anything but the first half of the game or even the quarter, or just if when you can see them, like, I'm going to get you this t-shirt made just to show these kids that they have that support. Like Cameron loved
Right,
it when we would all show up with our McGrone jerseys on, and he had so many
right.
numbers over the years, but even to this day, he laughs when he'll still see us like on a Saturday morning wearing one of his shirts from Little League, you know. So it's just good to build that support within your family. And if you don't have a big family, it's friends. It's like making a pact with your friends, like we're going to be here to support each other and support each other's kids. And I have that with my friend Sharita. She has 3 boys, and she's been a single mom here and there throughout the time raising them, and I was always present. Um,
Mhm,
so she's done that the same for my children,
mhm.
and so I don't know. Like I said, I know I'm blessed, and I know there's a lot of people that don't have those resources, but it's all about just making a pact. We're going to show up to these kids' games. We're going to
That's it.
support these kids, and then like you never know. Like if you get in a bind, they can be there. They can be there to be at their games if you can't, because that's what
Mhm.
the kids need. Like I said, going back to the whole mental health thing, they need to
Right.
have that support, and
That's it.
it just makes them feel better while they're playing. Like
Mhm.
they like people to watch them and support them, and it just makes them play better, I think.
It absolutely does. I mean, and just hearing you talk about your village as a mom, I think that we try to pull from every angle. You know, we know that if our schedule doesn't permit us to be there, we, as you just stated, we just want to make sure that during halftime, if they're, glancing around to see who's there, they see
Yeah,
someone,
yeah,
that Emil and Marquise and, Cameron and Derek, they see someone in those stands supporting them, because that is so important, because society will have you to believe that little Black boys don't have that support system. And I think a lot of
yeah,
times that goes into why the criminal justice system bullies our boys, because they feel like they don't have anyone. And so we have to be intentional in making sure that we are seen, and that someone is standing in that gap for them, at all times. Don't get
right,
it twisted. Don't mistake it. Don't make a mistake and think that this particular child doesn't have a support system, because he has a whole village of people.
right,
And so I
yeah,
think that village is so important, as the culture that we live in today. We have to be more intentional in showing up and just making sure people are there for our young student athletes. So I love it. It just gets your whole story. I'm like, okay, I started out, emotional. I'm smiling. So this has just been great, because I know that personally, we just love seeing Cam, the Step family. We love seeing Cam
thank
McGrone
you.
do what Cam McGrone
Yeah, we
does.
love you guys too.
I mean, I'm telling you, in our household, we'll be watching the game and we're like, okay, who Michigan playing today? Because we know
Yeah,
if number 44 is suited up, he's bringing something. He's bringing something. So,
we're
you
always
have to.
flipping back and forth too. Like with Andrea and Emil, it's like the game's gonna be on at the same time. So we like got
Right.
DVRs going. I'm like, put that on Maryland. I call my sister, like, hey,
Right.
DVR the Alabama game. And then we're like, ooh, like, well, we can watch Marquise because
Right.
his games don't come on till 1 o'clock in the morning.
1 o'clock in the morning, right? So I get to watch everybody. I get to watch Cam. I get to watch Emil. I get to watch everybody. You know, I was up at a game at ISU one weekend watching Dejan play, and still made it to the game, watched the full game, drove back to Indianapolis, and Marquise's game, you know, I was home that weekend because Kennedy had it, and still the game wasn't on. So, you know, it just, you know, Pac-12 is a whole different level, you know, that time zone. So I just greatly appreciate you. Cameron is an amazing young man, and we just appreciate you, you know, taking the time out to be on the show. So
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah.
yes.
That's a great segue for
Yes.
our zone. So we do have the segment Entering the Zone. And it's just a chance for you to give some last, you know, parting words, some words of encouragement, just something that you would want to leave with another mother. So now, Lynn Redd, you are entering the zone.
Yes.
One thing I want to say is, like, since we're talking about the village and talking about support mentally, emotionally, there are single moms that show up at the games, and I just want them to try to get more involved with the other moms. You know, like for me, like with Emil having experience in college and pro, you know, like I was like, wow, I was like, I need to start getting to know the Ekiors, and with Marquise, especially as well. So it's like I needed to reach out and try to befriend other moms just to see, like, do they know more than me, so that way they can help me through this process. And that, aside from like my family, that's a village, you know. Like there's kids that Cameron has played football with from the time he was 8 years old all the way to senior year of high school. And so that's like a village. We see each other in the stands, reach out and talk more, and they could become a part of your village. They can pick your son up and take him to practice if you're at work or if you have to get a second job. So I just encourage a single mother, because I remember how I felt, you know, the first 8 years of Cameron's life before David came along. And I know how I felt, like almost kind of lost, like I didn't know, even though I had my parents. I was like, I needed somebody else in my age range to talk to and to discuss things. And even the coaches, you know, the coaches can become a part of your village, you know, and it's all about building good relationships. I know some parents can go off in the deep end and their son might not be ready to be a starter, but they think they are ready to be a starter. So it's about maintaining a level of respect with other families and with the coaches, and building that bond with them so they can become a part of your village.
Absolutely. And that is so important and so profound, because we have to lean on each other. The whole platform of what Andrea, you know, Shalonda and I have created here is to say just what you just said. We don't know everything, you know. No one mother knows everything along this journey, along this process. So just imagine if the four of us having this dialogue and conversation, and one more mom tunes in, you know, and watches this, they're more equipped now than what they would have been before. And so that's what we're wanting to do. And you're absolutely right. We have to start. I think a lot of times as moms, we stay, you know, some moms stay in that bubble, not me, because I talk to everybody, but some moms stay in that little bubble, you know, but you have to get outside that comfort zone, because you hit the nail on the head. What if the very thing that you're struggling with, the moms that you're avoiding, they have some insight that would help you navigate this thing? And so I think Moms in the Zone, we're being so intentional about sharing these stories so that others can see, hey, you know, Lynn Redd did it as a single mom, and these are some of the things that she did along the process. This is who she reached out to, and that's what we need to do. So I think you're absolutely right. Yeah. Shalonda.
So we just want to say thank you for participating in Moms in the Zone. And we want to thank you for just being who you are, just authentically moms. We thank you for that.
It was nice to meet you too.
It was nice to meet you. So yes, it's all about just being an authentic mom. We do what we can with what we have. We do, you know, we do for our student athletes, in addition to, you know, like you were mentioning, just the people in our village, the student athletes in our village as well. And so we just want to thank you for just being an authentic mom.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you, Lynn, for being a guest on Moms in the Zone. This concludes this episode of Moms in the Zone. And so to our viewers, thank you for tuning in to Moms in the Zone, and we'll see you on the next episode of Moms in the Zone.
Whoop.
Thank you.